So just to go back to that transplant evaluation, so the first part is the medical evaluation of where the child sits on that risk. The second is to educate the family around what transplant life is like. How many visits? How do we monitor rejection? What is rejection? What are the medications? What are all the side effects? And making sure that families understand what that path looks like, and are ready to sign up for that, because different from almost any other therapy, if you take a heart for a child, another child may die waiting for that heart. And so from our standpoint, making sure that that donation is used to the best of our ability, families really need to understand what life looks like afterwards. And I think for many of our heart moms, so with children with congenital heart disease or familial cardiomyopathy who have been down this road before, it's a little bit different. You're actually sitting down before you decide on a therapy, and you're hearing every single possible complication, because your child will have one or two, but they're not going to have all of them. But we don't know which one or two, so we're going to tell you about all of them. And that 2 sessions with the nurse educator around what transplant is horrifying, and nobody would want transplant after that. So again, sort of, it's so different from what we do with our kids with congenital heart disease or fetal diagnosis, or right when kids are born and have cardiomyopathy. You know, talk, these are the possible paths, but you don't talk about every single possible complication. So it really is a very unique and sort of overwhelming education. And then we take those things and we come back as a multidisciplinary team, and there's really only 3 things that come out of that evaluation. Either we find something that makes transplant not an option, you're a good candidate but you're still too well, or you're a good candidate and we recommend listing. And so it's a very concrete, descriptive piece where you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that happens the same for every child. Some of the medical evaluation's a little different if you need a sugar test or a lung test, but for the most part, it's the same for every child who comes through, or every adult. Really, a lot of it is regulated by the federal government. They tell us every family needs to see a social worker, every family needs to see infectious disease. So there are some pieces that are required, but it's very different from most other ways you're interacting with the medical team. And so then, you know, if families hear that up front, this is what's going to happen over the next week or 2 weeks or day, depending how sick the child is. We're going to do this, and you're going to learn this, and then we're all going to come together, and here's what you're going to hear. Then at the end, by then, families are sort of, oh boy, I don't want to be in that, like, transplant's not an option category. And so the process is almost meant to shift that, understand how complicated and terrible it could be, and then bring you back around. If we wait too long, transplant is no longer an option. Heart transplant works really well if it's your heart that is the issue, but if your heart has affected your lungs or your kidneys, then heart transplant will not work.
So there's a window of opportunity.
There's a window of opportunity.
So it was nurse educators, and then we met with a social worker, and then pharmacy and infectious disease, and I think it was days. We were in the hospital inpatient for something else, and we did this also, but it's days of hearing everything, what life could be like after, and it's terrifying. So again, just kind of our personalities, I went home saying, this is terrifying. I don't want to do this. And, you know, it was my husband who looked at the positive of it. And then I think trusting the transplant evaluation process was huge for us, that it wasn't just us tossing a coin and making a decision, but it was a really medically guided and informed decision. Helped us a lot. And it also wasn't just trusting one physician who thought, this is what I believe, this is the way to go, but knowing and speaking with the entire team and knowing that it was a multidisciplinary team coming through and looking at all the options. Took a lot a lot of pressure off of us. Yet it still didn't take the decision away, because ultimately it still was our decision to go forward or not. So I think the whole evaluation process is really a strong point. I think it is overwhelming, yet it's really thorough, and it helps when an entire team comes together and says, this is our recommendation.